Body. The body is the biggest wooden part of your instrument. And yes, that goes for you too, Steinberger basses. The body can be made of a plethora of different wood species and many different shapes. In fact, it could have been made of plastic or metal as well as wood. The bass body is where the picking, slapping, or fingerstyle hand plucks the strings to generate sound. The vast majority of basses are made of either alder, mahogany, or basswood. Entry-level models use affordable substitutes like poplar, okume, and agathis. The body also acts as a soundboard, and its material affects not only string vibrations, but also the resulting tone, its volume, and its sustain. If you don't have a body, you basically don't have a bass. So it's a very, very important bass part. Finally, it's the most expensive and important bass part to replace. So you should buy the one you like instead of replacing it later. Bridge. The bridge is where the strings go on the picking side before stretching all the way to the tuners. There are many types of bass bridges, and their mass and material will affect tone and sustain. Although every brand developed its own kind of bass bridge, all of them share some parts and pieces. Most importantly, the bridge plays a key role in string height and intonation. Moreover, it is the part of the bass used to measure the instrument's scale that will go from the bridge all the way to the nut. Brands like Rickenbacker offer big metal pieces acting as a bridge, with lots of metal mass directly connected to the wood. Other brands like Fender offer different types of bridges depending on the model. Their high-mass bridge used on the Ultra Series basses is much bigger than their pure vintage 70s used in the American Vintage Series. Bridges are serviceable, replaceable, and upgradable, so they're not the best measure to buy an instrument. Saddles. The saddles are the pieces of the bridge needed to dial in the perfect intonation. Although when electric bass guitars were starting out, you'd have one saddle every couple of strings. Newer models feature individual saddles per string. The saddles move back and forth, allowing you to adjust the length per string, resulting in better intonation. To check on this, all you need to do is play the string open and then fret it at the 12th fret. If there's a difference between those two notes, that's something you can adjust by moving the saddles. However, that's not all. Besides moving back and forth, they also move up and down, so you can fine-tune the perfect height per string. Ferrules. Bass bridges could be divided into two categories, top loaders and string-through. All string-through body basses like the P-Bass, Yamaha BB Series, and Sire Marcus Miller have holes going from under the bridge to the back. The ferrules are the metal rings where you push the strings to make them come out of the bridge, so you can pull them all the way to the tuners. One thing that's controversial about them is that many players think that the string-through body design adds sustain and resonance to the instrument, while others claim that it makes no difference. In any case, ferrules are always there for you, getting the job done and vibrating the night away. Control plate. The control plate is another part of the bass that you won't find on every model. Some manufacturers tend to install knobs directly over the pickguard, while others have followed the old trend of the metal plate where the knobs are placed. This metal sheet holds the instrument's controls and, in some cases, also its input jack. There are many different types of control plates that range from the small precision bass minimalist approach to the big Music Man style with 4 knobs. It depends on how many controls it needs to hold. Usually it matches the color and tone of the rest of the bass's hardware. Knobs. The knobs are what you turn to dial the sound from your instrument. It usually all boils down to having volume and tone, but knobs have evolved too to match the needs of the manufacturers. For example, complex instruments with active electronics and multiple pickups might include switches hidden in the knobs, concentric knobs to modify gain and frequency range, and toggle switches to go from active to passive and back. A good trip to the past and back to the future is picking up an American vintage Fender Jazz bass with only 3 knobs and comparing it to the Ultra, which literally has all of those combined. Other companies like Warwick and Ibanez offer their own version of concentric knobs to modify the gain and also the frequency. Knobs also come in all shapes and sizes. They can be made of plastic, burled metal, or even wood on select occasions. Now this is where most companies get creative and show some character. Potentiometers. Potentiometers are what's underneath the knobs. Every time you turn a knob, you're actually turning the shaft of the potentiometer right underneath it. These pots come in different sizes and impedances, and they help shape the instrument's tone. For example, it's not the same to have a 250K, a 500K, or a 1M pot installed. Each will affect your instrument's tone differently. As a rule of thumb, 250K pots work great on single coil pickups. Think jazz bass and precision bass. 500K pots work great on humbucker pickups. Think Ernie Ball Music Man Stingray. And finally, you'll only find the 1M pots with an active preamp, like for example, most of the Ibanez line. Remember, you don't see them because they cosplay as knobs, but they're the unsung heroes of your tone. Pickguard. The pickguard has a self-explanatory name. It's usually made of plastic or brushed aluminum, and it guards the instrument's finish and paint job from the constant abrasive hits of your pick. This isn't a part you'll find on every bass you come across, especially on basses that are expected to receive much slapping or fingerstyle action. For example, Jaco Pastorius's jazz bass had removed pickguard and frets, while Joe Dart's and Flea's humbucker-equipped Music Man and Fender models never had one to begin with. This is an easy-to-exchange part, and it has no effect on tone. Therefore, feel free to experiment with it until you find the right one. Pickups. Pickups are responsible for your instrument's electric sound. The principle behind them is very simple, and it dates back to the earliest attempts ever made. Like Rickenbacker's frying pan, the electromagnetic field created by the coil wire and the magnets is distributed by the movement of the steel strings, and that difference is captured by the pickups and translated into an electric current. That current travels through potentiometers to the output jack, and then into a source that can amplify that current and turn it into sound. Single coil pickups have natural 60-cycle hum, generated by the coil. Although it might not be an annoying sound at low volume, once you start adding gain and compression to the signal, it becomes more problematic. Some of the most iconic bass tones come from these single coils in jazz basses, and the P-bass is going into cranked amps. Back then, the grit was part of the fun, but it's a little too dirty for modern standards. Humbucker pickups come to do exactly that. Buck the hum. These pickups feature two coils wired in reverse polarity, which cancels the hum. Plus, since it's two coils instead of one, humbuckers handle gain better and are generally louder. Finally, some brands have issued noiseless single coil pickups that feature a disconnected coil stacked in reverse polarity with the active one. Thus, the noise is gone, and it sounds like a normal single coil pickup. Neck pocket. The body of the bass and its neck meet at a very specific point. For bolt-on models, the neck is attached using springs in a neck plate or directly to wood. Set neck models use glue to keep the neck attached. These construction techniques change the instrument's sound and feel. While most bolt-on basses have more attack and snap, set neck instruments have more sustain and usually bolder low mids. The neck pocket itself has changed throughout the years, and while many still use the square neck plate, some brands have adopted a sculpted neck pocket that allows players to reach the higher frets and shred the night away if they want to. There's one consideration to make here, since there are two construction techniques that don't have a neck pocket: neck through and one piece. Neck through instruments utilize a single piece of wood that goes from the headstock to the bottom with two wings attached to form the body. A one-piece bass is an instrument built from a solid piece of wood, therefore the neck and body are a single unit. Neck. The neck is just like the body. It is paramount to having a musical instrument. Without the neck, you'd only have a resonance box, but no notes, scales, chords, or songs. The neck attaches to the body and takes strings all the way to the tuners while giving the musician the ability to steer the ship toward musical waters. Yes, the neck is where all the magic happens. Without it, the bass wouldn't be a musical instrument. Necks can be made of a plethora of materials that range from maple as the most common to wenge, mahogany, and even rosewood. Also, their shape and size determine the sound and feel of the instrument. For example, if you compare two basses with maple necks, but one is painted with glossy finish and one with matte finish, the playing experience will be different. Likewise, it's not the same to play a 50s Gibson neck, which is thick and big, than a 60s Gibson neck, featuring its slim taper shape. The difference is for the player, not the audience. But necks are game breakers or deal makers for most musicians. Finally, they also come in different lengths. The Gibson EB bass is a short-scale instrument, while the Ripper model is a full-scale bass. Besides cramped fingers, the sound changes too. Short-scale instruments tend to be more bass-heavy than long-scale ones. Truss rod. Necks have a truss rod that goes all the way from the headstock to the neck pocket. A truss rod can be considered a long spring that occupies the center of the neck and is needed to adjust the neck's relief and bow. Although the wood types used to make necks have an exceptional stiffness to weight ratio, the pull of the strings tends to bend it up. To counter that movement, the truss rod makes the opposite force, keeping it straight. As a wise piece of advice, especially if the neck on your bass is made of mahogany, please avoid a DIY approach to adjusting the truss rod. If you don't do it properly, you might risk your instrument's welfare. and once you have a warped neck or a broken truss rod, there's very little you can do to fix it. So always have it checked by a professional. Fretboard. The fretboard and the neck might or might not be a single piece of wood. In most cases, they're not, and the fretboard is a slab or laminated sheet of wood that is glued over the neck, covering the truss rod. The shape of the fretboard isn't flat, otherwise it would be very uncomfortable to play. They come in different radii that go from 7.25 inches for a vintage approach to beyond 16 inches for a modern super fast experience. An even more modern approach is having a compound radius so you can enjoy vintage roundness up the neck and go wild beyond the 12th fret. Fretboards are also made from different tone woods, and they have a big impact on the overall tone. For example, maple fretboards are known for being snappy, edgy, and with lots of bottom and high end. Rosewood, on the other hand, is sweeter, warmer, and has more mid-range. Other tone woods used for fretboards are laurel and affordable instruments, ebony and walnut for more high-end basses. Ebony is closer to maple, while laurel mimics rosewood, only that being less defined and with more high-frequency response. This is also the part of your bass that will allow note choice, since that's where the fretting hand goes. Although you could potentially change your instrument's fretboard or neck, it's a very costly and difficult endeavor. Therefore, you should be happy with it upon purchase. Frets. Frets are the metal bars dividing the fretboard into the notes. Each fret represents a semitone, and most basses have between 20 and 24. Although they have always been straight lines, lately some companies have developed fan-fretted instruments, which follows a more precise note pattern. Frets also come in different sizes. Vintage-style frets are narrow and tall, while modern iterations are taller but wider, like the famous Dunlop 6105. These are called jumbo frets. The difference is for the player only, since they look very similar. As a rule of thumb, the bigger the frets, the more effortless the playing becomes. Also, the fret material alters its durability. The strongest available are stainless steel frets. Finally, since your bass strings are made of metal, frets have a lifespan and might need to be changed over time. Don't worry, some instruments go through several of those in their lifetime, especially vintage basses. Fret markers. Some frets divide the fretboard into semitones. Markers are used to guide the player through the neck and find notes faster. While most instruments use just white dots over dark wood and black dots over clear woods, other companies get more creative. For example, Gibson uses parallelograms and blocks. Fender uses blocks in late 60s and early 70s models. Jackson uses shark fin markers like Rickenbacker, and others like PRS make them into birds. This is an aesthetic choice. Markers have no effect on tone. Side dots. Side dots are placed on top of the fretboard and they mimic the ones on the front. They're there to help guide the player's hand. We're looking from above, so the front markers are useless to us. New materials used on professional basses like the Fender Ultra series glow in the dark, which is great to nail that performance even in the darkest stages. Nut. The nut marks the end of the fretboard. It can be made of a variety of materials. Back in the day, before mass-produced basses, they were made of bone. This isn't an abandoned material, but newer synthetic alternatives like Tusq have proven to be more efficient, especially in the long run. The scale of the instrument is measured from the nut to the saddle. Just like it happens with frets, nuts can be changed by a seasoned technician if they happen to wear out or break. Dropping your instrument can chip it or break it. When people say stands are a must, there's a reason behind it. Headstock. The headstock is the final part of the neck. Not every bass has a headstock. Yes, I'm talking to you again, Steinberger spirit. Nevertheless, every brand has its own headstock shape protected under severe copyright. Depending on the headstock, the strings can go 4, 5, or 6 in a row, or 2 on one side and 3 on the other, or even 2 on each side. Also, depending on the neck's construction, this can be the weakest part of your instrument. Basses with an angled headstock like the SG and Les Paul basses by Gibson, which have a mahogany neck, will slap if they hit the floor with the headstock. Remember the stand? Well, with an angled headstock, it can be a catastrophe. Tuners. Tuners can be thought of as pulling mechanisms to make strings tighter. To tune the instrument, you need to add tension to the strings, so they can go up to pitch. The tuners or tuning pegs oversee that. Tuners come in all sorts of shapes and sizes. For example, Fender basses are known for having a flower-like set of tuners, while brands like Ibanez employ a much simpler motif. The mechanism and the gears inside the tuners suffer the pass of time, and the normal wear and tear can cause damage to them. Fear not though, they're easily replaceable, regardless of brand and model.